And welcome everybody. I just want to thank you for coming. So I'm very proud to introduce the Toxic Exposure Research and Military Family Support Act of 2014, which will help provide care to our veterans who have been affected by exposure to toxic substances. Now, nearly 3 dozen rugged C-123 transport planes form the backbone of the U.S. military's campaign to spray Agent Orange over the jungles hiding enemy soldiers during the Vietnam War. After the war, some of these planes were used on cargo missions in the United States, and many of the troops who were exposed to the Agent Orange during the conflict were ultimately compensated for diseases associated with exposure to this toxic effluent. However, those who worked, ate, and slept in the planes after the war were also exposed to Agent Orange and are experiencing the harmful effects, but they have not been taken care of, and that is not right. My bill will extend care to these veterans who can show that their medical illnesses have a direct causal nexus to a toxic substance they were exposed to. Additionally, medical and scientific studies have shown that there are long-term negative effects not only on the soldiers who served, but also in their children and their grandchildren and subsequent generations, as many are suffering from the various forms of birth defects. It is time for us to take care of not just those who served, but also their children, whose diseases can be linked to their parents' exposure to Agent Orange. My bill extends coverage to veterans who are exposed to Agent Orange in locations other than Vietnam: Thailand, Laos, Okinawa, the Philippines, Johnston Island, Korea, Cambodia, Guam, and military installations within the United States. The bill also directs the VA, the Veterans Administration, to work with the National Birth Defects Registry to track and understand the genetic link between Agent Orange and the multi-generational medical conditions in the offspring of veterans exposed. We have today some of the faces of Agent Orange, people whose lives have been drastically altered by this harmful toxin. We have Mr. Herb Worthington and his daughter, Karen Worthington, and Mr. Richard Switzer and his daughter, Stephanie Tompkins. And I'm proud to stand beside them as we fight to get our veterans and their children the care that they deserve. I'm here today to say to those suffering from the devastating effects of Agent Orange that you are not forgotten. I will say that again, you are not forgotten. And this is about keeping our promise to our veterans. This is about making sure that they get the care that they not only deserve, but that they have earned. This is about the sacred pact with the members of our military. If you serve our country in uniform, we will look after you when you come home. The medical care and benefits we provide are modest in exchange for the sacrifices that they have made, and which can never, ever fully be repaid. I am proud that commitment, and I am proud of that commitment. I will continue to fight for these servicemen and women and work with the Department of Veterans Affairs to make sure that they get the very best care possible. Now, I want to thank Senator Blumenthal for introducing S-1602 on the Senate side, the Senate version of this bill, and applaud him for his leadership in carrying the baton in the Senate. I also want to thank the Vietnam Veterans of America, the AMVETS, the American Legion for being here today and for their leadership and work on this very important issue, and my colleagues here in Congress for being here today. We have a moral imperative to right this wrong. The United States military is the best in the world, and our veterans deserve the very best care in the world. Thank you, and now I would like to introduce the Executive Director of the Vietnam Veterans for America, Rick Wiedemann. Now, Richard F. Rick Wiedemann serves as Executive Director for Policy and Government Affairs on the national staff of the Vietnam Veterans of America. He served as the 1AO Army Medical Corpsman during the Vietnam War, including service with Company C, 23rd Medical Americal Division located in I-Corps in Vietnam in 1969. So we'd like to have Rick come on up and share some words with us. Thank you.
Congressman, we thank you for taking the initiative and picking up this bill and introducing it on the House side. What has been left out of this equation, and certainly there's been a great deal of sound and fury in the media over denied access to care. Well, those who were harmed by virtue of military service in locations outside of Vietnam, and those children and grandchildren who have been harmed, are denied medical care all along. And so this bill is a step in that right direction of starting to get the studies done and provision of services to those who have been without those services, really some of them since birth, unless their family had medical insurance privately. The studies showing association, and causality is always very difficult to prove in any environmental wound, but showing association between exposure to the herbicide and other organic phosphates and the conditions that we see in our children and grandchildren is something that we believe is possible in short order, and it just needs to focus. VA has been absolutely remiss and derelict in doing research into Agent Orange and into Gulf War illness and to the other toxic wounds that people have as a result of modern warfare. And once again, we salute Congressman Honda for stepping up to the plate and look forward to working hard with him on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And oddly enough, today we did some work on appropriations, and we did look at some funds of money for medical research. So I shall be a little bit more careful when I go through that to see if there's certain kinds of things that we need to be watching out for. Before I introduce our next speaker, Ian DePlank of the American Legion, I'd like to ask my colleague.
Yes, of course.
He's always ready. And I would like to have him come up and share some words with us. I call him the doc because he's so smart, and he speaks the truth, and he understands that phrase, speaking truth to power. So please welcome my colleague.
Good afternoon. I am Congressman John Conyers of Michigan, a dear friend of Chairman Honda's, and I want to commend all of you who are veterans or research experts or family supporters of this toxic exposure research legislation. Particularly Vietnam Veterans of America, the American Legion, and AMVETS. Now, I happen to be a veteran of the Korean War and a former officer of the Army Corps of Engineers and of the Army Reserves and the Michigan National Guard as well. And so the well-being of my fellow veterans and their families has been a top priority for my work in the Congress. I don't know where you were in 1983, but I was in the Congress and the proud co-sponsor of the first piece of legislation in the House of Representatives addressing the impact of Agent Orange on servicemen and veterans. As you recall, that was quite a long and overheated discussion of whether there should be health care in issues that should be considered in that problem. Now, more than half a century after Agent Orange was first deployed, veterans and their families are still suffering from the consequences of a deeply unfortunate decision around that subject. And so we can't in good conscience ask our veterans to sacrifice, if necessary, their very lives by fighting overseas in our behalf, only to require them and their families to shoulder the burden of service-related health problems when they return. It makes no sense and it's not fair. When these service-related health issues are passed on to their children, as sometimes has happened due to exposure to toxic substances like Agent Orange, our government must do everything it can to lessen the burden and provide care. And so the legislation that I joined Chairman Honda in today will allow our government to provide necessary assistance by providing needed funding for treatment of the descendants of these veterans, and by promoting coordination with the National Birth Defects Registry and designating a medical center to treat and research the health conditions of descendants of veterans exposed to toxic substances. This legislation will make great strides toward finally righting this wrong and closing this tragic chapter in American history. And so I thank everyone here who supports or has contributed to this important piece of legislation, and I look forward to working closely with all of you until and after it is signed into the law of the land. Thank you, Chairman Honda.
Thank you, Doctor. He's not a medical doctor, but he's a doctor nevertheless. He's also the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. Ranking because we're not the dominant party. Were we the dominant party, he'd be chair. And things could be different. So let me just say parenthetically that this is not a partisan issue. It is an issue of morality, it's an issue of obligation, it's an issue that we stand by the veterans and their families. And so just want to let you know that Justice is Dr. Conyers' middle name, and I hold great respect for him. And you know that if you are with him, then you're in good company. There's an old saying, I'll tell you who you are by the friends that you walk with. And in Spanish it's a little different, but it's about the same. That we say that you can be judged by those with whom you walk. Next, I'd like to introduce Ian C. DePlank of the American Legion. He served with the American Legion since August of 2007. Mr. DePlank served as a sergeant in Virginia Army National Guard from 2002 to 2005, including a deployment to Afghanistan in 2004 to 2005, during which time he was awarded the Combat Infantryman Badge and an Army Commendation Medal for actions in combat. Mr. DePlank.
My name's Ian DePlank. I'm here on behalf of the American Legion. The American Legion was founded in 1919 by men who had seen firsthand what mustard gas does on the battlefield. They were there in World War II and beyond that in the atomic age and saw the effects of ionizing radiation. Through Vietnam, they started to see the effects of Agent Orange, and they fought for veterans to get treatment for Agent Orange. Through the Gulf War, we fought for the same things. In my conflict in Afghanistan, in my war, we saw burn pits, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But there's one thing that's been consistent throughout this whole thing. Veterans don't question, service members, Marines, Army, they don't question. They run into combat, they do what they need to do, and they take care of this country. And all that we ask is when they come back, we do what we need to do. Number one, that's treat the victim. Number two, that's research it so that we can understand how to treat them better and so that we can make sure that these things don't happen again. When I was stationed in Afghanistan, in Bagram, there's a 24-hour trash fire that goes on in Bagram, and giant column of black smoke that comes up from it every day, or this was the case certainly in 2004. It was a base of about 8,000 service members. And all of the trash bulldozers would just push more waves of trash into this ongoing fire, and you'd see this column of black smoke go up. And we stood guard duty in the towers just downwind of it. And so you'd stand a 12-hour shift as this column of black smoke just keeps wafting through your guard tower all day. And, as soldiers, you just go in and you do that because that's your job. And you joke about, I'm pretty sure that OSHA doesn't think that this shirt I'm wearing over my nose is the appropriate environmental equipment for this, but that's what you do because it's part of your job. A lot of people don't think about this, but when you serve in Afghanistan or Iraq, in America, we're pretty much used to the fact that we've gotten rid of asbestos in most places. You walk into buildings that were built by the Russians and abandoned 20 years ago with asbestos insulation just ripped off of the pipes and particles floating in the sunbeams in the air, and you think, that can't be good. But all you can count on is that you're going to get taken care of when you come home because you've got a job to do. You don't have time to think about that. Well, these are people here who are trying to take care of that, and that's what we need to do, and we need to do that as a country, and the American Legion is very behind that. You take care of the people that you've hurt, these environmental exposures, whether it's mustard gas, radiation, Agent Orange, Gulf War illness, the burn pits, asbestos, whatever it is, you take care of the people who have suffered from those through all the past conflicts and anything in the future conflicts. And you study it, you make sure you take care of their families, and you make sure we don't do this in future wars. It took us a long time to admit that there were problems with Agent Orange after the Vietnam War. It's taking us less time to admit that there are problems with the burn pits in the current war in Afghanistan. Let's just hope by the time we get to wherever the next war is that we've figured out what the problems are before we expose our men and women to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think you're right. All the veterans I visit with at Walter Reed, a place like that, I asked them, would you do this again? And to the person, they said, yeah, I would. Mm-hmm. And so with that kind of a commitment, our commitment as a nation cannot be any less. So just want to share that with you. Next, I'd like to introduce Herb and Karen Worthington. Herb Worthington is a Vietnam veteran of American Region 2, Director and Chair of the Vietnam Veterans Administration National Agent Orange Dioxin and Toxic Exposures Committee. He served in the Mekong Delta with the 2nd of the 60th and operating off Navy landing and attack boats, served in Vietnam for the year of 1970. And he is here today with his daughter, Karen.
As was said, I served with the 9th Infantry Division and also the 25th Infantry Division in 1970 for the full year. I am a victim of Agent Orange. I have type 2 diabetes, peripheral neuropathy, my eyesight is going, and I'm on an insulin pump for the type 2 diabetes. So it's not heading in the right direction. You've heard enough about me. We do an awful lot within the country doing town hall meetings, and trying to let every Vietnam veteran know about what's going on, and also Gulf War veterans, and so on. But I think the main focus of this whole thing is on our progeny, our children, our grandchildren. Both my children have problems, and my grandchildren do also. But my daughter is here today, and she'll tell her story. This is Karen.
There was a dioxin in barrels with an orange stripe in Vietnam, Agent Orange, and that dioxin has done so much more than destroy the vegetation as it was intended. I just marked the 19th year since my diagnosis with multiple sclerosis. I went from being an all-star athlete to needing Harvey, my cane, just to get around. That's in addition to what I call my bionic leg. It's this cool device I wear around my leg that helps me lift my toes up so I don't trip over them. Now that device is not covered by health insurance, of course. Not everybody has $6,000 just laying around to cover that, but I find a way to get things done, and so it's just the way I am because I don't give up. And I've also had melanoma here on my neck, and I told my brother that I'm going to need a really good story for the scar, which goes from here to here, to tell people, and for that, you know, give a name to that story. And he said, "Oh, just say you got it in AM." Little did he know that there would actually be a connection. And now I'm being treated for trigeminal neuralgia. And now most people don't know what that actually is, and I was happy to finally get a name for these electric shocks that I was getting in the side of my face. And once I finally got this name, after going to dentists and endodontists and periodontists for months, I ran to Google. That's a figure of speech because I don't run anywhere anymore. When the Google comes back with trigeminal neuralgia is among the most painful conditions known to humankind. So that's encouraging. And I'm one of the most positive people you'll ever meet. But being positive is exhausting. And being handicapped is expensive. But I keep going. I often trip. I sometimes fall. But I always get up. And Faces of Agent Orange is bringing the stories of what those barrels with the orange stripe mean to so many of us. And people are listening. And this legislation is validating our stories. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Next to speak is Rick Schweitzer. He served in the 25th Infantry Division in 68 to 69, where he lost his leg while serving his country, Vietnam. And he's here today with his daughter, Stephanie Toxins. So, Rick.
Rick Switzer, I was in Vietnam in 68 and 69 with the 25th Infantry in Cu Chi. And this is my daughter, Stephanie.
I apologize, I'm very nervous. Not very good speaking in front of groups of people. As you already heard, my dad was in Vietnam and he slept in a landmine. It's always emotional talking about my dad. And he lost his leg below the knee. Surprisingly, the loss of his leg is the least of his problems. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer, which was in remission, but has since reoccurred and metastasized. He is currently getting treatments. My brother Bobby has severe asthma, and at the age of 31, he was diagnosed with pleurisy and endocarditis. He has been treated 3 times in the hospital and is currently being seen by a cardiologist. The doctors told him he has a mutated gene. When I was young, I was diagnosed with hip dysplasia and was treated by wearing a leg brace. During school, I struggled with academics and test taking. In the 11th grade, I was diagnosed with ADD and learning disabilities. I am now a Monroe County Sheriff in Rochester, New York, and I'm very proud to be able to achieve that goal with such a difficult time in test taking. A little over a year ago, I gave birth to a beautiful little girl. I had a normal birth without any complications, and it was expected that everything was fine. That night, the doctors performed the new baby physical and discovered that her femurs, the large bones along her thigh, were alongside her hip joints and lacked the proper alignment for her hips to work correctly. They told us she had severe hip dysplasia. Madison was put into a full body restraint immediately. They were very worried about nerve damage and also the blood flow to her joints. Every other week, we'd have to take her to the orthopedist, and he would tell us her hips had not yet set into joint. It took 6 months for her cartilage to turn to bone, which was unusual. Finally, after 4 months, they started to wean Maddie out of the body restraint, and that was the first time I was able to hold her and see her entire body. Maddie sees a doctor every 2 to 4 months and will continue to do so until she is older, when she still might need surgery. They say she could develop arthritis, so she will have to be seen by an orthopedic surgeon for the rest of her life. I'm not complaining about what I have gone through, and I know my dad and my brother don't complain about their illnesses either. Right now, Madison is lucky to have a good health care plan, but what if I lose my job? Or what if my job doesn't provide health care anymore? What about those who don't have support from their family or adequate health care plans? What will they do? I thank Congressman Honda for supporting our efforts to get answers, and hope that his support for our children and future generations will be assisted by our government. Thank you.
All right, Stephanie. Gotta be careful with her. You're the second female sheriff I know. Rockland County, right?
I'm sorry.
Rockland County?
Monroe County.
Monroe County. Okay.
Write that down.
Well, congratulations, and you gotta be real proud of her. Huh? You got a get out of jail card?
Not quite yet.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Diane M. Zumato. She is the National Legislative Director of AMVETS. Diane's a former WAC member who was stationed in Germany and Fort Bragg, North Carolina, was married to a CW-4 aviator in the Washington Army National Guard, and is the mother of 4. Diane?
On behalf of AMVETS, I'm pleased to be here today in support of the Toxic Exposure Research and Military Family Support Act. For as long as we've had a military, we've had toxic exposures. These exposures have happened in combat and on over 100 military installations, both in and out of the United States. AMVETS' concern regarding the issue of toxic exposures is simple: the health and quality of life of our veterans. Veterans from every era have suffered and continue to suffer from the often debilitating effects of a variety of toxic exposures, including Agent Orange, often with no knowledge of their original exposure and with little to no hope of relief. This particular issue is especially important to me, as both my sister and I were stationed at Fort McClellan, Alabama, which we now know is one of the most toxic sites on the EPA Superfund list. And you just heard testimony, this isn't actually here, but we just heard testimony about exposure to Agent Orange and hip dysplasia. And actually, my firstborn child was born with hip dysplasia. And when the doctor came in to tell me that she had a problem, he asked me, does anybody in your family ever you know, do you have any history of this? And I had never even heard of it. So Agent Orange is one of the chemicals that we were exposed to while we were at Fort McClellan. In any case, I think right now we have two choices. We can continue to deny the dangers that our servicemen and women face on a daily basis. We can continue denying their related health care needs, and we can continue denying their compensation claims, or we can finally acknowledge the dangers our veterans have been exposed to, clean up all the dangerous sites, and prevent new ones, and provide our veterans with the health care that they earned through their service. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Other members of Congress wanted to be here, but they have other duties that weren't right now, but they wanted to make sure that folks knew that they were interested in this. As the Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Grace Napolitano, Brian Higgins, William Keating, Ann Kirkpatrick, Peter Welch, Eleanor Holmes Norton, Natalie Bordallo, and Annie Vega. And also Congressman Conyers was here, and Congressman Raul Grijalvo from Arizona. So a couple of things. I just want to thank everyone for coming today. This bill is of vital importance, but just as important as getting this bill out is the media that's present here, that the media, through the media, that we engage the public and we teach and educate the public of the kinds of things that are going on with our veterans and their children and their grandchildren. And that our military is not, they're not laboratory rats where we can experiment or drop things on them while we're fighting a war to see what other effects could be affected. When we send our soldiers overseas or to areas of conflict, they do it on our behalf, giving their full measure. When they come back, if they come back, there's an expectation, I believe, that we should fully back them up and not have technicalities get in the way. If there's research that has to be done, let there be research. If we need to do genealogy studies, let there be studies on genealogy. But the bottom line is that this country, this government, this nation owes them that measure of quality of life, that measure of investment, to make sure that the rest of their lives they will have medical care, medical research, so that we will know how to deploy our soldiers in the future, that we will have regulations that will think about their health and their well-being as they serve, and not let it be a consequence of chance or nature. And I think that whether it's this government or other governments, when we look at our soldiers and we ask ourselves, what is it that we owe them? We not only owe them a thanks, but we owe them the investment in order for them to know that it was worth their while, worth their lives, that they did this, that the commitment they had not only to our country, our flag, and our Constitution, but to the people that are enjoying the life here will have the full measure of their investment. And so we, in fact, should return that full measure to them. I don't know if there's any questions of our speakers or those who have given their testimonies, but I'm sure that they're prepared to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, it must be that this has been a well-covered issue generationally and through the different organizations. We have just formed, in my mind, a coalition of people with the single-mindedness of making sure that the veterans, their children, their grandchildren will receive that kind of attention, and to not to be able to put up with the excruciating pain with a smile, but to know that there was a purpose behind that, and that purpose will be well served. And so let us not allow our children, our grandchildren suffer the consequences of a battle, of a conflict previous to their being existing. And so I think that as a nation and as a country is based on law and morals, that this is also a moral obligation that we have to all of you. So with that, I just want to thank you for your presence. Thank you for your work, and we'll keep in contact so that we know that we're creating a network across this country so that nobody can say they didn't know, that nobody can say that they didn't understand, that nobody can say that in the future we will not allow this thing to reoccur again, that whenever we send our soldiers into conflict, that we will send them with full knowledge of what it is that we're going to be using to combat the enemy, and especially the kinds of chemicals or gases or whatever, that we don't deploy them just helter-skelter, but that we understand fully what it is that we're doing. And so to all of you, we owe you this, not a gratitude, we owe you this duty to follow through. And the following through is what it is that you deserve. So again, thank you so much for being here and your service. Thank you.